Good evening and welcome to this edition of Defacto Review with Jargal Defacto and myself, Grace Brown, bringing you a weekly roundup of news and current affairs here in Mongolia. We're live on Facebook at V Television. You can also follow the conversation on Twitter, hashtag Jargal Defacto.
Jargal_Defacto.
Jargal_Defacto, my apologies.
Yes.
Coming up on the programme. Mongolia's ruling party nominates former Deputy Prime Minister Khurelsukh as the new Prime Minister. Stronger commodity prices lift Mongolia's growth, but can it last? The family of incarcerated investor Munshi appeals to the media. And the government bans marmot hunting after their population plunges. Thank you for joining us. Well, after weeks of uncertainty, Mongolia's ruling party, the Mongolian People's Party, has finally agreed on a new Prime Minister, the former Deputy Prime Minister Khurelsukh. This is pending a formal parliamentary approval before October the 6th, with the State Great Khurel to reconvene this week. So, Jargal, first up, tell us, who is Mr. Khurelsukh? What do we know about him?
Yeah, well, first of all, he is, I was told it's almost from tomorrow, October 2nd, the Great Khurel starts. So the first thing to discuss will be him. And he is to gather his cabinet within, he has legally a right for 16 days, but I think because due to the circumstances, he is to make the cabinet this week. Who is this man? Well, this man is, he's a well-known politician. And about him, his former colleague, Mr. Namtabayar, said he is now the acting minister for social protection. Mr. Namtabayar said that he was himself a part of corruption since 2000, when the political People's Party had split it into People's Party and People's Revolutionary Party.
Yes, that's right. He was instrumental, wasn't he, in changing the name from the MPRP
exactly,
to the MPP.
Because they have changed the name, because the party is split, he had to resign that time, I remember.
After they lost the election in 2012?
Yep. Yes,
yep.
And so he is a wealthy person, though he was working all his life in political offices.
Yes, he's a career politician, as you say,
yes,
with no business interest. But
over
he's
1 billion tugriks as income was declared, which is quite large money for political officers. And yet he said, very famous forwards, he said, Mongolian state became mafia and our party became a company. That's his famous words when he was criticizing the previous resigned government. So there was a four reason he said that why they should cabinet should be resigned. The first one was the previous cabinet had honored concessions of some 700 billion tugriks concessions to a connected party of the cabinet members. Second, Irdinet Mongros Tzvet. These cases were clearly made, Parliament made a very clear decision on these two issues. Nothing is done, he said. Third, Development Bank, Mongol Bank, and bond issues. The people who are misused our funds have no responsibility. Had that not been called for, held for responsibility. The fourth was, remember the case when they were spying each other. We are not clear who was spying who in between Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, who was the Khurelsukh that time. With the previous government, he was Deputy Prime Minister, first Deputy Prime Minister.
This August.
So this case is not clear. And hopefully when he became now, he's becoming now Prime Minister, it's not just technical issue. And we are waiting for him to do what he had promised.
So he has a record, a reputation of being unafraid of picking a fight. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, he was beating that time Parliament member very strongly, almost like professional. He fall down and they other colleagues
Yeah, they
came
had
out.
a physical
He
fight
just took
in
him,
Parliament, right?
hit him, and he fell down. The other parliament members came and they took him apart, took them apart. So that was the case. And very relatively young, energetic, Mongolia University graduated young man who was very active in the youth wing of this ruling party.
Yes, didn't he set up Mongolia's the Mongolian People's Party youth organization?
One of the founder and longtime leader.
President,
and later
yeah.
on, he had some fight with the next leader, who is the Mr. Namtabayar,
But
who was giving very diverse opinion about him.
And he picked a fight as well with the former Prime Minister Enkbayar's wife. Is that correct? He said
No,
that
this was.
he went after her spending habits,
yeah,
financial.
that fight. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
He was disclosing her spending and a number of things which is not related, which is not coherent with the political party leader's wife and etc. So he, at certain times, he was raising several important issues for better governance of the country.
And that was when Enkbayar was seen as having a very tight grip on the party and the country. So
Exactly,
it was
yes.
quite a bold move.
And interestingly, in another interview, he said what he will do. He had promised to do 4 things. First, he will create the wealth fund, sovereign wealth fund first. Second, he will set public offices operation standards, he said. Third, he said he will develop Mongolian way of development. Basically, he said, what is the difference of our national difference? And the second, how about the immune of our culture? That was the 4 things he was planning to implement during his interview a month ago in Unodur newspaper.
So already a month ago he was eyeing this position.
Yes.
And he has the backing of many young members of the MPP, even though at 49 he himself isn't necessarily young.
Yes.
So, you know, in this sense, do you think that he might be able to bridge some of the divides within the party, which has that supermajority in parliament?
Well, this political party, unless it addresses properly the financing issue of political party and political elections, they will not be able to solve many problems, because this is the source of corruption in this, not only in this, but other democratic parties. 2 ruling parties have this problem. They keep in secret their political party financing, which we believe that are being the sources of corruption in the country. It comes through the distribution of high-ranking positions, depending on the money you have contributed to your political party. So this is the source of the fights. This is the source of short age of Mongolian government. Now it's on the average 15 months only.
Well, he is sort of pitted against Speaker Myagombo Enkbol's city faction. Is that correct?
And he thinks that Mr. Myagombo Enkbold was not sufficient leader enough to get the political parties winning at the presidential election. And also he is blaming his this Ulaanbaatar factions for wrongdoing, for the 60 billion to Greeks. Remember cases where they have tried to raise money for before selling, pre-selling the public positions. So he is against all these things now in his speech, in his words, but in his deeds, let's see. That's the whole people are waiting. And also, you know, it depends on who will be his colleagues in his cabinet. If he, now it's about 15 people, and if he has half of them as parliament members, he is himself not parliament member. It's the 4th case where non-parliament member prime minister comes in this country. And we expect half of them to be parliament members at least, so that he has more stable government. The first conditions, so that he don't have much opposition from the Khural.
And he's said that he doesn't wish to change the structure of the government and the ministries, but simply the people who are leading them.
Yes, another concern, this back khural, small khural of the political party, of this ruling People's Party, they have decided to make their Congress, which is to be announced 45 days before, which they have announced last week, and at the end of November probably we'll wait for that Congress. That Congress, according to their statement, they will change completely the small khural. Small khural members, there are 245 of them.
What is the big khural and the small khural for?
Big khural
those
is
of us who
Congress.
don't know? Okay.
Small khural is the kind of ruling body of this small Congress, in between Congresses. And then this big khural, which is consisting of 245 members, are nominating executive board and political executive board. And that board is very important, 33 persons in between small khural sessions. They will actually run. It's our old version of the Politburo of their party.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, and if at that Congress, because only the Congress nominates or votes for the head of the party, if tomorrow Prime Minister Khurelsukh is nominated as the head of this ruling party, then his cabinet will be more stable. Otherwise, I don't think he will be stable. His cabinet will be strong. And
one of the critical things that he would have to oversee if he does indeed go on to become Prime Minister is that $5.5 billion IMF-led bailout package. The IMF has said that they are waiting to see that the new Prime Minister is confirmed before making the second tranche payment to Mongolia.
Yeah, last Friday at the Standing Committee, State Structure Standing Committee, Mr. Khurelsukh said an interesting false statement. He said, as you said now, he will not change the structure of the cabinet, first. Second, he has to issue new bond to pay Chinggis bond $661 million in January. And third, he said that we will continue the extended fund facilities program of the IMF. The fourth, he said he will fight strongly with corruption. That's the four things he said.
So does this mean that he will continue with the reforms that were required as part of that program, including government spending cuts and tax hikes?
Not sure if they will increase more further taxes, but he will, because, we will talk later about the economic situation now, that we have more budget revenues. So I don't think he will be increasing more taxes, but he cannot change the law they made. So
what has already been agreed?
Increased,
right.
Yes.
Right. Well, despite the ongoing political uncertainty, as you mentioned, Mongolia's economy is at an interesting point. It's actually rebounding. The Asian Development Bank has now raised its growth forecast for the country in 2017 from just 2.5% up to 4%. In fact, official data showed that in the first quarter, Mongolia grew 5.3%. That's up from just 1.2% for 2016. Stronger growth in neighboring China, still Mongolia's biggest trade partner, has boosted commodity prices, the main driver of this economy. But how long can it last, Jagul?
Good point, because to 2018, the ADB is already decreasing our growth for 3% from 3.4% from last year forecasting. So from 3.4 now 3, they say.
Right,
the
so
major
you're saying
reason
it's better in 2017 than previously,
yes,
but they're making it lower for 2018.
Yeah, the main reason probably it is because we don't expect much growth of export of coal, which is already decreased for the second half of this year due to technical capacity of the cross-border issue through China. What happened was China got 4 large gates before, now they have decreased into 2. And nowadays, this long kilometers queue of the tracks, 160 kilometers, still there, in spite of all the requests through the embassy, through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They keep working only with 2 gates. And nowadays, Mongolians, ordinary people, are coming to more conclusion that it's a political pressure from China on Mongolia. That's what we found it, because this long queue is getting longer and longer.
So the demand is there,
Demand
but
is
the
there.
exports aren't physically getting through, which is
Exactly.
that could affect revenues further down.
Secondly, last week the North Korean sanction for exporting coal was stopped. Now they will be exporting to China the high quality coal called anthracite. And that will, because the sanction helped Mongolia to increase the export. Now when it's against, they stop at the sanction, I think we will decrease our, that's my concern. That's probably one of the reasons why that now is, they're forecasting is 3%. And this Mongolian economy depends on a lot coal and copper. And nothing much we are creating ourselves so far.
And we've been through this before, the boom until 2011, that was then followed by the bust starting in 2012. Commodity prices are known to go up and down, and the ADB also said that more diversification is still needed away from mining into other sectors. So what areas should investors be looking at, and is enough being done to attract them?
Well, agriculture, tourism, which requires, for example, open air policy for air transport, which is not
It's still so
not
expensive
happening.
to come here, yes.
Yeah, and this airport, new airport, is delaying and postponing their final date. It was October next year. It looks like even another year more because the road is not ready, and we are covering cost of empty airport fully functioning every day, unfortunately. An Asian Development Bank, which with the World Bank together had promised $2.5 billion US package to the country in forms of loan and I understand also grant. They are going to give at least 50% of the grant. I assume it's to be about $1 billion, and 50%, $500 million US. They're going to give. They said they will give to the state, to the government for budget deficit. And somehow, budget deficit is covered by aid agencies. I mean, this is old song, So how long, I don't know it will go.
So they're not addressing the fundamental weaknesses that still exist in Mongolia's economy, and its heavy dependence on commodities.
And one of the attempt or plan of ADB is $100 million US will be given to the banking sector. Looks like after this AQR, asset quality ranking review of there is all banks are being reviewed, right? And I assume that review will end up having separate fund for bad assets after the bad assets paid from the risk. We call it bad loan risk fund. They will be partially covered, but there will be loans which has to be completely separated from the bank. In bank will be required to increase their own capital. So after that, still I think the country will need more, not only $100 million, I believe, more $1 million they need for making sound the banking sector, without which we will have a big problem.
We also need to know who the new finance minister will be. Is there any clarity there? Will
No, not Mr. Chojul Suren, who was former finance minister, because I believe he has more chance because it was more complete clash between two parts in People's Party. There are 65 parliament members, right? And 32, 33 is neck fighting now. So I don't think it will be anybody from this part. So it should be from this camp, and hopefully half of them will be from this camp. The remaining half is going to be from probably more professionals who is not either politicians or politicians but not parliament members.
I see. Well, one thing that all foreign investors want, as we know, is certainty, and several cases against foreign executives have caused jitters lately, among them the former Gobi Coal and Energy executive Munshi, an Australian and British national. Now, he was jailed in July and sentenced to 11 years prison and ordered to pay $15.8 million to the Mongolian company Monas International. Monas says that he defrauded them because plans to take the company public stalled after coal prices fell in 2012. Munshi has lodged an appeal, and his family have also recently appealed to Australia's media, citing fears for his health. Now, it's a complicated case, but it does highlight some of the legal risks for investors here. His sentencing came after a 2-day trial. Do we know how the trial was carried out?
Well, I first heard about that from Australian news. Australian news, foreign news, saying about Mr. Munshi, what happened. And in the Mongolian media, there were several information. He has a Mongolian wife and 3 kids. And then he now is Australian, maybe the worst, I don't know. But he had registered 20 companies in Mongolia, or 10 companies in British Virgin Islands. And all of them altogether have about 40 or so mining licenses in Mongolia. And one of the attempts with these licenses, he is trying to raise money. And he promised to, in case of this Monnis, he will do it within a couple or so years, IPO, and then the investment will be increased 2-3 times. He had promised board seats, which none of them happened. So for that, for more information, I had an interview with Mr. Khurelsukh, who is now CEO of the One Gate company, a daughter company of Monnis, for clarification.
Yes, in 2009, Mr. Munshi has introduced 3 mining projects to our company. He said that if he invest money to these projects now, it would be much cheaper, and within 1 year he would launch an IPO and raise our investment value. So we trusted him, and we invested 25 million USD, American dollar, to this project. So they concluded that Mr. Munshi has conducted unlawful act in the country, and he have swindled 25.5 million USD from Monas International, and so court concluded that this money investment has to be compensated.
So I further clarified about the court, and the first level court in Mongolia is district court. In one of Ulaanbaatar 8 districts, Hangul district court made court decisions after hearing 2 days on July 19th this year, that the court found Mr. Munshi guilty in embezzling fund. 20 and it says in
because the IPO
yes,
never happened.
It says that embezzlement became a way of life, and he had been repeating that more than 3 times, which is regarded as more heavier crime in Mongolia, because you are embezzling 3 times or more. So because the court had given him 11 years imprisonment and also a penalty for 31 billion tugriks to Monas International for that. So we have just now asked this man from this company. But another very interesting case, many foreigners were quoting to this Hong Kong newspaper case news, in which Hong Kong arbitration was asking to pay $11 million Monas company. And it turned out it's not Monas company, it is his Monas CEO owner, Mr. Khurelsukh, and his, not him, but his brother, who has a separate business, and he had borrowed some money from Mr. Munshi company, Coal and Energy, Gobi Coal and Energy, and it was the Hong Kong arbitration made decisions against him to pay. So it is not two connected cases, I understand. So that's information we have so far, clarified, and all this, what we found out in media and this man is saying. That's the news so far.
Is there anything being done to try and prevent or perhaps better resolve disputes between foreign investors and Mongolian companies in the future?
I think now they have, the Scorpio Coal and Energy Company had appealed to city level according to our law. The law system, they have appealed, and I understand almost next week or so, very shortly, there will be city criminal court case. That criminal court case will show, mostly probably answer your questions you have raised. Of course, we are concerned about foreign investors. But if such things happen, if it's true, then it's not every investor is becoming an investor. So that's the situation, and we will see and we will follow, and we are open to anybody who will communicate with us on that issue, right?
Well, finally, marmots are one of Mongolia's most popular delicacies, so much so that the fatty rodents are now in trouble. Their population has plunged from about 15 million in 1990 to less than 5 million today. The government recently banned marmot hunting beginning September 22nd for 3 years. Jargal, I haven't actually had the pleasure of trying marmot meat myself. Why is it so popular in Mongolia?
Well, actually, personally, I didn't like much. I tried. But the issue is we are losing the ecological balance. Because marmots is so much, you see 15 millions there were, right?
15.
Even, it was even more. Why? All around the country, I saw the same marmots in Colorado, for example. Very similar
They're
situation.
large squirrels, aren't they?
Yeah, what happens is, squirrels?
Similar, aren't they? They're like big squirrels?
Well, at least they help the soil being ventilated with air circulations, because they make huge hole under the soil to different directions. And in this hole, not only marmots, but other smaller animals live there too, one. Secondly, so it gives good conditions for grasses. So where a lot of marmots, they are more greener, the grasses.
Really?
In that similar, yes. One reason. Second reason, they themselves are food for wolf, fox.
And perhaps
Yes.
snow leopards?
Snow leopards.
Right.
And when marmots are not enough, these animals are suffering. And these animals are suffering, then eel, seek, other wild animals are thriving. Because the nature is made in such a way, right? And also when we have a less marmot, it doesn't help for deforestations. Because the soil, the humidity is becoming less.
Wow. I didn't realize just how ecologically important marmots
it's so fragile balance. The other thing, Mongolians were selling marmot fur for coat in Russia. Russians like that animal because they fur coat because it's very long lasting, very warm.
The fleas in the fur reportedly carry the bubonic plague. Is that correct? I mean, marmots were blamed for bringing the Black Death to Europe in the 13th century. Is it wise?
Occasionally we had one or two.
There's still cases to this day.
That's why not only we stopping the killing, hunting for marmots, but also bringing the meat, the fur to the city, which unfortunately some crazy people are violating because they like their meat. So people have a different taste.
This is a safety issue as well, right?
Exactly, safety and ecological balance issue.
But do you think the ban will actually work?
Ban works, but sometimes all the rules always have exceptions, and there are people who are misusing that rules.
I think it would be interesting to see how that hunting ban is enforced in the countryside.
Exactly.
Well, that brings this edition of Defacto Review to an end. Thank you very much for being with us, and hope you can tune in again next week. From Jargal and myself, Sakana Murari.
Have a good evening. Bye.